Welcome to the Can Report. Today we have two guests, Matt and Amy Carter. We talk about the importance of having balance between working at a fire station, in a fire department, and being able to come home and having as normal of a home life as you can. It's a very candid interview. They talk about some personal things. I really appreciate them coming on. I hope you enjoy, and we'll catch you on the other side. Today we're got two guests. One's rather attractive, and I work with the other one. We've got Matt and Amy Carter today. Appreciate you guys coming in. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having
Thanks.
us.
Let's talk about yourselves to make it easy. A little bit of a softball to start with. Where'd you meet? Where you went to school? Whatever you feel comfortable talking about is what we're going to start with.
All right. So we're both Waterloo kids, born and raised here.
We were mutual friends in high school, stayed friends all throughout high school, lost touch when Matt went into the Army and I stayed in school. And so we lost touch for about 5 years and then met back up again on a night out, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So, and started dating pretty
Yeah.
soon. We hung out for 2 weeks while Matt was home on leave from his second tour, and then he went back overseas and came home, and we just continued dating, got engaged. 6 months later, we got pregnant. 6 months after that, we got married.
Mm-hmm.
2 months later, we had Justin, our first son, and a year later, Matt started at the fire department.
Awesome. So what? We don't have to get too specific, but how much of how many years different? Are you guys the same age?
No, we're 4 months apart. We're in different grades in high school because I'm a spring kid, she's a fall kid.
Mm-hmm.
But two of my best friends in high school were also two of her best friends in high school. So we hung out with mutual friends a decent handful of times.
Yeah. Right after you graduated, Matt, did you go into the Army?
Yep. I actually signed up right before I graduated. And so I graduated in spring of 2001 and then left at the end of August for basic training, or sometime in August.
So you signed up before 9/11.
Yes.
This is going to be something that you had planned to do.
Yes.
There wasn't a immediate rush or feeling of patriotism. Not that there's anything wrong with the people that did that, but this was kind of your plan.
Yeah, so I've told that story several times. People ask, "Oh, you're in the Army. When did you join?" 2001. Oh, because of September 11th. Nope, I joined for some college money and some life experience, and I was in basic training when September 11th happened, and my plans changed rapidly. I already had locked in that I was going to go to South Korea for a year, so I went there for a year, and then came back to the States to a unit here and wound up going to Iraq twice with the initial invasion in 2003, then home for 11 months, then back again for a year. And during that second tour, when I was back on leave for a couple weeks, that's when Amy and I met up again.
Mm-hmm. So you did 2 tours?
Yes.
Totaling how many years?
2.
2.
Yep,
2?
one each. 1 year each.
Gotcha.
So I did a year in Iraq, 11 months back in the States, and then a year in Iraq again.
How long were you in the active military?
5 years. 4 years, 11 months.
Okay. During that time then, Amy, so you had one more year of high school, right? Because you were a year behind.
Right.
Not behind, but
Yeah.
the next year.
Yep.
You graduated in 1, you graduated in 2. What did you do after high school?
I went to school, and
Where'd you go to school?
I went to BV for a year, and then I came back here, and then went to UNI. And so after school, I pretty much was just palling around with Matt because we had Justin.
Mm-hmm.
So then I was married by the time I got out of school.
Okay. What'd you go to school for?
Psychology.
Oh, very good. Are you in that field now?
No, I am a commercial insurance agent.
Hey, I'm a park ranger.
Yeah, it's kind of like an English major.
Yeah, right. You find something else to do. Do what you love, but then find a real job.
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. So you mentioned that you joined the military in part to get some money for school.
Mm-hmm.
What was your plan after? What was as a 18-year-old that knows exactly how the world works and what he's going to do? Where was Matt Carter going after the military?
College history professor.
That was my. I originally went to UNI to be a history teacher, realized I was nowhere near smart enough to make it into their college of education, and thus became a park ranger. We've talked about school so far, and we're going to continue it because it's a big difference between that carefree college experience that most people have after high school to now I have a job that requires me to go back to school. Tell me about P School.
Backing up just a little bit, leading into that, when I got out of the Army, I did go to Kirkwood for a semester because my plan was, to go to college. That's what I planned on doing when I got out of the Army. But with a kid and a family, things rapidly changed, and I wound up getting hop into a couple different jobs, and then going to the fire department. So I really wanted to go to college. I always intended to go to college, but I was only able to do one semester before life really happened, and I wasn't able to anymore. So I'd been on the fire department for about 6 years, and my intention had always been to go to paramedic school. I had intended to become a paramedic when I got hired during that first year, when I learned what the department was about and what the different career paths are. Well, paramedic, that's what I want to do. Well, then, as you know, there was a hiccup with the paramedic program at Hawkeye, and it shut down for a few years, and Waterloo stopped sending paramedics on the city's budget. And when Hawkeye's program started up again, it really piqued my interest, and they were advertising hard for that first class. And I had looked into the year before going down to Kirkwood or Iowa City and doing their program, but I couldn't make it work with the travel time. It just wasn't going to be possible. So when Hawkeye restarted their program, I sat Amy down and I said, I really want to do this, and I feel I need to do this for my career. I've been doing this for over 6 years now, and this is what I want to do. I want to take this next step. Plus, the Army money, if the GI money, if you don't use it, in 10 years it drops away. Now, you have 9 years and 11 months and some days to use that money, and the day you use it, you're good. It doesn't matter if you go past that, but you have to start using it within that 10 years. And I was past 8. So I knew that if I was going to pull the trigger on this, it had to be now. So I sat her down and I talked about it, and she was super supportive. And I went to school, and it was an 11-month program. As a full-time student for 3 semesters, the fall, the spring, and then the summer for 2 months. And yeah, now I'm a paramedic.
At the time you were going through school, you had both boys by then, correct?
Yes. So I went to paramedic school in 2014, and our second son was born in 2012. So we had a 7-year-old and a 2-year-old when I went.
Looking back, Amy, did you have any idea that it would take as much time as it did away from family, and along with a 53-an-hour-a-week job?
No. That's the quick answer. No.
Right.
But I also worked part-time during that time when he was in paramedic school, so it gave us a lot more flexibility as a family for me to be there when Matt couldn't.
Good. And that's certainly a part of it, as I don't think anyone understands that to go through something as I don't want to say grueling, because I guess grueling to me is more a fire scene on a 90-degree day, as opposed to sitting in an air-conditioned class learning about anatomy and physiology. But just the rigors of that schedule, along with working. We're lucky enough that we're on a department. They try to work with us as best we can to go through medic school, because I know it's the best for the department, it's best for the employee, it's the best for the city. But there's still all that extra time that you have to put into it. Looking farther in advancement, why did you want to be a paramedic? Other than it's the right thing for the department, 80% of our calls are EMS based.
I am one of those people. I love being a firefighter, and I love my job, and I plan on retiring from this career. But I get bored. I'm just one of those guys. I've always gotten bored. After a few years, I want to do something a little different. And sometimes, it can be 5-6 years before I want to change stuff up and do something a little different. And I was too content where I was. I was a tailboarder, just a line firefighter. And I just wanted to stay within the fire service, and preferably, not switch jobs. I've got seniority, I've got time, I'm building up a pension, but I wanted to do something different. And ultimately, I would really, really love to be a lieutenant someday. And you've got to do something. And I just wanted to do I just needed to mix it up. And I'd been thinking about it for years. And so it's just something I really wanted. My dad had been a paramedic on Waterloo Fire, and he had talked to me a lot about the ambulance, the enjoyment of it, along with the challenges of it. So I had that in my head also.
That's what I was going to mention too, is we've always had his parents as a tremendous support to us. And with his dad being a firefighter, he's always given us advice and just like kind of where do you want to go in your career? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? So it's always been great perspective for us.
Your dad wasn't one of the original medics that went to become paramedics, so was he?
No, he was
a little
right
bit
after
later,
that,
yeah.
because he was hired in 84, and I think all those guys went to school in 80. 82.
Yeah, it's early 80s. Is
Yeah,
when we started
he
the
worked
paramedic
with all
program.
those guys. I mean, when he became a paramedic, those original guys were all the senior medics, so those are the guys he learned from.
And I think that's a wise thing to do. What are you learning as a paramedic that you don't think you could have learned about as a tailboarder or firefighter?
Critical thinking by myself. I mean, you have a partner there, but really when it's your call, I mean, you're in charge. And as a firefighter on a truck, you have your lieutenant. And the lieutenant has the captain of the battalion chief. He can call on the radio if he has a question. As a paramedic, it's a lot more thinking suddenly by yourself. Here's a sick person. Figure it out.
And we've talked about it in different podcasts too, just the idea of sick versus not sick.
Right.
Making that initial decision right away, and then in one sense following through with what your belief is, but in the second sense, without second guessing yourself, always checking to make sure you're still going the right path.
Yes.
Because there's no net. I mean, there's medical control, there's your partner, but at the end of the call, you write your name on that report, and it's your patient, and it's your care.
Yes. And there's oftentimes, as a paramedic, you're the first person on scene, the first unit on scene to something that's way bigger than you. And you got to be able to recognize that right away and call for resources. So that's another thing, that decision making. When is this over my head? Do I need a truck crew? Do I need to contact the battalion chief? Do we need PD? So a lot of it is recognizing, making those decisions when you recognize that you're over your head and you need help now.
If you look at just simply how our department is ran right now, our fire chief was a paramedic.
Mm-hmm.
All 3 battalion chiefs were paramedics. All 3 captains were paramedics. I would say the majority of lieutenants currently were paramedics.
My understanding is that's never, at least with the 7 staff members at the top, that's never happened before.
No, I don't believe, certainly not in my time. And I'm old enough to have worked with some of those original guys as well from 82, that this is the most medic friendly or medic understanding staff that we have.
Yes.
Amy, let's talk a little bit about Matt after he became a paramedic.
Sure.
Did you notice any changes? Was the stress levels higher? What did you know? Was he fine? Was he absolutely normal as Matt gets?
Matt's pretty good at masking stress, but I could definitely see it kind of coming and boiling over at times, especially just from the balance itself of having this massive workload at Waterloo Fire with paramedic, and he's a new paramedic and trying to learn everything, and then coming home, having little kids. So as much as I could, I always tried to alleviate some of the stress off of him that way. But of course, it was day-to-day shenanigans with the kids.
You kind of go through a bell curve as a paramedic where you're that brand new medic, and everything makes you nervous because you don't have any experience to go off of, but you don't want to always have to lean on your partner. You want to be able to stand on your own 2 feet. As you grow and gain experience, you kind of find that sweet spot where you just want the next call. You're not thinking about any type of burnout. You're at the peak of being a paramedic. You're up on all your skills, and you're ready for the next shift. And then, unfortunately, for a lot of people, and I was one of them, you start to get that. You start to see, I can't do this forever. So I need to start switching gears, doing other things, learning how to do it differently that I can still get by. And I think a lot of people are in that category, that they don't understand that bell curve, and then with the stress, they don't necessarily cope with it properly. I know I was notoriously bad coming home, and Angie would ask me how my day was, and I I could have had the world's worst day. And my answer was always going to be the same. It's like, it's okay. It's fine.
To put everything out there, it was probably the hardest time during our marriage is after paramedic school and him on the ambulance, just because we're trying to learn more about each other. We're trying to be married, to communicate, to raise little kids.
Right.
And so we had to develop new tools ourselves, just, so that we could have a healthy marriage.
Yeah, it's not happy-go-lucky Matt and happy-go-lucky Amy that we're dating,
Yeah.
after high school. We're grown-ups.
Yes.
We have little ones that we have to take care of, and we have pretty heavy jobs that we have to watch out for each other with.
Right. So right now, Amy and I have talked about this several times over the past 6 months, and it just kind of amazes us. We'll just bring it up. We'll look at each other and like, I love you. Our marriage is the strongest it's ever been, and it blows our minds that we finally have reached this point where we communicate openly, and even if we fight, within a couple hours, we come at each other with understanding, like, hey, here's why I'm upset. Why are you upset? And we actually talk it out like adults. And it took years to get to that point. And a big turning point with that is I kind of burn out. You talk about that bell curve, but in that bell curve, I believe, especially near the end of it, there's peaks and valleys. It's not just a straight, bell. The whole overall shape, when you zoom out, is a bell curve. But if you zoom in on it, there's a lot of little peaks and valleys to that. And I know you talked before. What really struck me was with the Sam Hess podcast.
Yeah.
That episode, I listened to that, and Sam voiced something that struck me that has happened to me so many times, but I never realized before, and that was that feeling when he talked about when you come home and your brain shut down because you've been hypervigilant for 24 hours and you just can't even deal with anything. And Amy and I looked at each other and we were both like, whoa, how many times have I come home and I just put my hands in my face and she's asking me questions and I'm like, I don't know, and I don't know the answers, and I'm just frustrated because all I want to do is get the kids to school and her to go to work so I can have silence. And I never understood how to voice that. I didn't know if it was normal because I didn't really talk to anybody else about that. And this was just, this episode with Sam, we just listened to it a couple weeks ago. So this is new stuff about understanding, oh, okay. And it really gave her some new perspective on, oh, okay, well, I guess there's a lot of guys go through this. I didn't know that.
Right. Angie and I had a pretty good conversation afterwards as well on, you do all those things.
Right.
I'm like, I do not. I'm fine. But
so the big thing about getting to where we're at right now is realizations about myself and where I was at. I don't know if you talked in past episodes, I can't remember, about 331. It's the ambulance downtown that I was assigned to. It's extremely busy, and I did 4.5 years on it, which is a pretty good run. And I got off of that ambulance in late 2020. We all know what happened in early 2020, and I think that COVID helped accelerate me burning out. Looking back, I was getting snippier with everybody. I was getting snippier with my coworkers. There's a couple times I wasn't impressed with my patient care when I'd sit back and look at it. And I had an argument with my partner, who's one of my best friends in the department, and we clicked for years. And it just came to a head, and I just exploded at him, and we got in an argument, and I felt really bad about it. And I got a little time away from the ambulance and got some perspective. And one of the biggest things is I've known I've had PTSD for years, but I just tried to deal with it. And I finally went back to the VA and talked to a VA counselor and got put on an antidepressant. And oh my gosh, I feel like I'm myself again. I feel like I was years ago. My anger is almost gone, and if it's there, it's like normal and easy to control. I just get so angry sometimes my foot would just start hopping and start clenching my fists, and I didn't know why. And the stress of the job wasn't helping, and she's going to wind up being the sounding board for all that when you come home and vent, and then venting just turns into yelling, and then and you're just in a bad mood. And so it was really looking within myself and coming up with a different way of thinking about stuff and recognizing my problems and getting some help. And that's one of the biggest reasons that our marriage is so strong today, is we finally started. I got on medication and we started communicating.
Good. That's the important thing to do, is to find that help where you need it. You mentioned about just getting angry. And I noticed that was one of my things as well. losing my mind driving home because someone's blinker in front of me is on.
Yes.
Are you kidding? And then I think I did it. I did it in the car with the Angie one time. She's like, "What is your problem?" You know, and I'm like, "I don't have a problem. That guy's got his blinker on."
Mm-hmm.
And it's not until you look later afterwards on, man, what was my problem?
Mm-hmm.
It's important to give that self-care. We talk, think, I'll give you an example. So you go to a medical call and the house is absolutely crawling with bed bugs.
Mm-hmm.
You go back to the station, what do you do?
Just strip out of your clothes usually on the app floor and then go upstairs and change.
Right, because what don't you want to take home?
Bed bugs.
Bed bugs. Don't bring them home.
No, and that's a no-brainer, obviously, because we can see those. We can't see the PTSD. We can't see those stressors, so we bring those home.
Yes.
It's important that we self-evaluate on that.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of bed bugs, it's a. I came home from work one day, and kids go to school, and I don't remember any bed bug calls at all. I can't think of anything that day before that would have triggered that. But get the kids off to school, she leaves, I go upstairs, go to the bathroom, strip out of my clothes, take a shower, and I pick up my clothes to throw them in the hamper, and there on the floor on the white tile is a bed bug dead, laying there. And I start panicking. And so immediately my clothes go outside, and I just throw them out in the driveway, and I'll figure them out in a minute. And I start looking everywhere. I stripped our bed, I checked all my stuff, and for weeks I was going along and pulling the mattress sheet almost every day and running along and looking along the edge of the mattress and my kids' mattresses and checking. I never found a single one. I think I got lucky with one dead hitchhiker that was probably caught in my pant cuff. But yeah, that one freaked me out a lot.
Amy, how long before he told you that story?
That day.
That day.
But that day,
Yeah.
very
Because
good.
I'm like, hey, you need to keep an eye. I showed her what to look for. And I'm like, we need to check every day. So when I'm at work, you need to check also. If you find any little bugs that look like ticks, let me know immediately.
Matt, you take company officer exams.
Yes.
You're one that wants to test. You're one that wants to advance on, which is always good. We always need those people. What draws you to that idea? Why would you want? And this isn't an interview question by any means. Why do you want to be a lieutenant?
In the Army, I made the rank of sergeant. I had a few guys underneath me. I had a small team underneath me. We'd be given orders and we'd execute our mission, and I thought I was pretty good at it. I think that I am a pretty good middle manager. I've done a job similar to lieutenant before, as in a high-stress situation, being in charge of a few guys, and you've got to make stuff happen. So it's just something I've always just really wanted to do. When I look at my career progression and my career path, it's I kind of have seen it for about a decade now as my ultimate goal. And who knows, things might change if I ever make lieutenant, but you've got to have goals. In any career, you got to have goals. Mm-hmm. And that's my goal. You hear guys talk about the time, and you hear, it doesn't matter what department, company officer, line officer in charge of an engine of guys is one of the best jobs, most coveted jobs in the fire service. There's so many firefighters across the country who make it to that point, and that's where they spend their career, and they're happy and they're great at it. And that's my ultimate goal. Mm-hmm. And a big part of that is because of when I was a sergeant in the Army, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoy having a team of a couple guys and working with them and teaching. I love teaching new guys. I love showing them stuff, taking them on calls, teaching them stuff while we're on calls.
Yeah, I think my time as a lieutenant was, I don't know if it's the most rewarding, because I think every aspect of the job that I've been in so far, I found rewarding aspects to it.
Oh yeah.
But it was certainly the freest or most fun. I was on the truck that I wanted to be on. I had the driver I wanted to have. I was downtown where most of the action happened, so I always liked that. The bump up to where I'm at now was absolutely a case of moral obligation in my mind that I can do that job. I think I can do it well, and I think I can change it in a way that's better for the department, better for me, and better for the city. When you say those things on, you think you want to be a company officer, I would say never ever limit yourself to a spot on that. I try to remember the seven habits of successful people. One of them being is begin with the end in mind.
Yes.
So understand that where do you want to be at the end? That's important, and that's important in our career. However, you can't limit it.
The end can become the middle. Once you reach
Right.
the end, oh wait, I'm only in
Yeah,
the middle.
I can do more than this. When I first started, I was planning on becoming a driver. I wasn't going to go to paramedic school. I wasn't going to do anything. I wanted to be a driver. I came from volunteer department where that seemed like a pretty cool job, and that's all I ever wanted to do. And that was the 1 and 2 exams that I never got promoted off of.
Part of that also, just like I said before, how my dad's been a big influence on me in my career and my life is my dad retired at 28 years in the fire department, and he made it all the way to chief. And I don't know how many times I've heard him say, being a lieutenant was the most fun I had in the department, and it was probably my favorite job that I've had in the department. And so obviously I'm influenced by that too.
Right. You get to do all the cool stuff on the fire truck. You get to go into the fire. And that was one of my big drawbacks of moving up to a battalion chief was I still wanted to fight fire. I still want to fight fire. And I had a good talk with another battalion chief on how do you relegate that? How do you get that feeling to go away? And he said you don't. But at the beginning of the fire, you're just going too much. You have too many things to think about that you can come across it later on. Let's talk a little bit about our scheduling.
Okay.
Amy, how do we schedule your life around a 24 on, 48 hour off schedule?
Well, I schedule everybody's life.
Perfect.
And I think that's how it works in the fire service is a lot of the times the spouses kind of take control of the schedule. And so it's all just, working your magic and having Matt there when he can be there for the kids, when especially right now we're in the middle of baseball and at school events and everything, but otherwise I kind of fit it into my schedule because I have the flexibility at work.
How do you do Christmas?
Christmas when the kids were little was a little different. We used to celebrate it the day before he would go on shift. If it was if he worked on Christmas Day, we would celebrate it Christmas Eve. We've done a week later. You just have to get creative with it.
Right.
Especially with birthdays are the same way. We've missed family reunions, we've missed other gatherings, but myself and the kids always try to make an appearance. But it kind of becomes the norm of dad's working shift, and you just get used to it.
Right. I've even noticed as well, like my mom will try to plan things around my schedules. Like I have 2 sisters. You have a large family, Mom. It's okay if I miss once in a while.
Right.
We'll try and get to the next one. But you do feel a little bit of guilt for that because you can't be there.
We talked about that. The weird thing is I don't at all because I'm a second generation firefighter. This is all I've ever known. I was 1 year old when my dad got hired. This is how I grew up. I grew up celebrating Christmas on Christmas Eve, or we'd wake up and open presents at 5:30 and dad would go to work and mom would immediately go back to bed. So or dad not being home for birthdays, that's exactly how I grew up. So I just model after what my parents did. So for me, it's actually the norm. My kids are growing up with the same schedule I grew up with.
You mentioned a little bit ago talking about COVID, how it changed things around. Did it change your job around at all, Amy?
Yes, I got sent home, and I was home all through COVID. With us being home at the same time, we had never spent that much time together.
Right.
Honestly,
Yeah.
because we're always kind of passing each other.
She got sent home first. She was the first person in our office to get sent home because I'm on the ambulance and I call her one day and I'm like, hey, so I've taken 2 people with COVID to the hospital today already and it's not even dinner time yet. This is real now for us. What do we do? So the next morning she tells her boss, and before she came in, and did you even wind up going in that day or did they set your stuff outside the door?
I called her on the way into work, and when I got to work, there was a box sitting outside the door.
And she became their test case from working from home. That day pretty much was just her at home with IT on the phone trying to set up, because then they realized, well, she said they had already been kind of talking about what do they do if we have to have people work from home. And so suddenly she became their test case.
Yeah, luckily we had a great systems gal who I talked to constantly that first week.
Right. So did you set up an office in one of your rooms where if Amy's in the room, she's at work?
Funny thing about that is that he was fixing up our office and doing a little remodeling. He built me a desk, and he had gotten done about 2 weeks prior to COVID. And so
nicely timed.
Yes, nicely timed, and it worked out well.
Completely unplanned. I started after Christmas because I had a couple days off, and it was just the extra bedroom. It's the small one. You can tell it was the one that was the nursery bedroom. We've got 4 bedrooms for 3 people. So it was, since we had moved in, we'd lived there for a couple years, and it was still boxes stacked in that room. Mm-hmm. So I just I had a few days off, so I cleared everything out, repainted the walls, decided what am I going to do with this? Well, it'd make a good office. It's perfect size for that. Built a desk along the wall and just did it just because. Mm-hmm. And well, then COVID happened. She has fixed to work from home. Completely accidental.
Right. And I'm sure, along with everyone else whose kids came home during COVID, the hardest thing to do was to balance working from home and also trying to teach from home.
Sure.
You know, being a new teacher, having never taught, it was challenging.
Your kids probably went to Waterloo School.
Yes.
Probably, when they left for the rest of the year, correct?
Yes.
And they got pulled. I felt bad too because they got pulled early. So also with her getting sent home, now our kids get sent home because I'm exposed, and then I got sick and probably had COVID, but it was in the early days and I couldn't get tested yet. I just know I was really, really sick for a week, and it coincided with me hauling a bunch of patients that were COVID positive. So now my kids are home from school and they're not sure how long they need to keep them home. 21 days, 30 days. Waterloo Schools was still trying to figure it out. So yeah, it affected everybody. It affected my kids, and their grades suffered because they were out of school more than their friends were, and then she's working from home. So it was really tough. And all of this led up to me having that. I didn't burn out completely, but it was definitely part of burnout. You know, it was definitely a dip, and I hit a wall at work. Mm-hmm. And COVID definitely contributed to that and accelerated it.
The increase in call volume. You know, I think COVID will be something that they talk about in history books 40 years from now. Mm-hmm. And maybe in 40 years they'll have an idea of how it really affected us long term. You know, we're not far enough away from it right now to be able to understand exactly how it's changed our culture.
Right.
What I've said in the past to guys is, especially in the fire department side of it, was we almost went into a hibernation where we just tried to survive taking calls. We didn't do a lot of external training. We did trainings online, which is great, but it's not as good as hands-on when it comes to firefighting.
Right.
And we have to start getting out of that sleep. We have to start getting more active on things. And I think that's probably across the board.
I've noticed that too. I just said something to Matt. I said, I feel like we used to be busier, but I don't know how that's possible.
Yeah. You mentioned one of your sons is in baseball.
Yeah, they both are.
Yeah, so getting back into those types of things where we have practice, we actually get to go to practice, we have those things to do.
During that time, they were both on club ball teams. David was just getting started in full count, and Justin was on the Waterloo Diamonds. So, you know, with them canceling all of those practices, all those games, they were also missing out on that aspect of just camaraderie and hanging out with their buddies.
They got angry at me. My son, our older one, Justin, he's 14 now, so he'd have been about 12 at the time. He got very angry at me. Actually told me once that this is all my fault that he can't play with his friends. That makes you feel great.
Right. I'm not patient zero, son. I didn't do it, I promise.
Kids aren't always rational.
Right. Well, and they don't look at the big picture. They only see how they're affected.
Right.
Yeah. Talking about kids a little bit, let's say 4 or 5 years from now go by, and one of the boys comes to you and says, Dad, Mom, I want to be a fireman. Just like Dad, just like Grandpa. How do you respond to that?
Absolutely.
All for it.
Absolutely. It's the best job in the world. Mm-hmm. I mean, and you can say that easily because we've lived it, you know, and we've gone through it. We have perspective is the most important thing. But it's tough. But it's like any other job. Like, you really kind of just learn to acclimate to the schedule.
Yes, I wouldn't dissuade them from it, but I would definitely sit them down and have a very real conversation about it, because it's a very rewarding job. It's an awesome job. It's kind of a throwback in some ways to the dream jobs of our parents' generation. Get yourself a good union job with a pension,
right? And
it's still a very solid one of those. But the guys are great, the experience is great, the camaraderie is great, but there are trade-offs to that. Trade-off is your schedule and the addition of a lot of stressors and seeing a lot of stuff that most people are never going to see in your life. So you have to be aware of that going in and the trade-off. And I would just want to make sure that they realize that it is an awesome job. I'm not trying to dissuade anybody from it. but it's tough, and it is not for everybody. And I just want to make sure that they realize that going into it, that it does add a lot of additional life stress. And there's some people who do it in 10 years in, 5 years in, this isn't for me, I've got to make a career change. And I didn't really understand that at the time when I was new about why people would leave the fire service. But after doing this for 13 years, I get it now. I get that how this job can become too much if you don't handle it properly.
What are your plans for retirement? What are you guys going to do when that happens?
Is that going to happen?
It comes
Someday.
by quick.
No, I'm looking at probably another 25 to 30-ish years.
So you said you have 14 in?
13.
13. How many will you have in at 55?
30.
You'll have 30.
I got
so
hired
that's
at
the
25.
golden number, 25.
Yeah.
Are you going to stick around? Do you want to?
Nope. I don't want to. How often you see guys, it'll be sad to leave. I mean, how many times you seen guys who are tough as nails tear up on their last day? Mm-hmm. But then how often you see guys between 55 and 60 get hurt? That's the magic number, 55. Right. That's why cops and firefighters can retire at 55, because between 55 and 60 is... My dad was 58 and blew his knee out and tore it up at a house fire, falling down some basement stairs. Wouldn't have happened if he'd been 10 years younger, probably. Mm-hmm. 55, I'm out, and I'll probably just get a part-time job and just bum around, something to keep myself busy. I'm not going to stop working, but to preserve my body and enjoy my retirement, because I'm 39 years old, and I'm feeling aches and pains that, I didn't even know I had. So yeah, I'm out at 30. Mm-hmm. And it's not because I don't enjoy the job. I want to enjoy my retirement.
I think I'm going to work until Matt allows me to be a professional volunteer.
Oh, that does sound good.
It sounds good.
Let's talk a little bit about volunteers. I mean, you guys are really pretty active in the community. Do a lot with Irish Fest?
Yes.
Let's talk about Irish Fest a little bit.
Well, Irish Fest, August 5th through 7th this year. Shameless plug.
That's all right.
First weekend in August. There's a lot going on. So usually April up until the fest, I'm pretty busy doing parades and outreach. We organize about 4 to 5 parades a year that we try and attend. And other than that, when the fest comes along, I spend pretty much the whole weekend down there just working the gates, running around. Matt helps out quite a bit with my parades and prep.
So right now we're taping in early May.
Mm-hmm.
What's your biggest concern right now with Irish Fest? What do you have to get done now? Anything, or you've got it so locked in?
I've got some prep to do for the parade. I've got a parade float that needs some repair, I should say.
The giant green hat that you watched me build
at
Station 2.
Mm-hmm.
Well, after a year and a half, it's looking a little sorry, and it's in pieces on the floor of my garage, and I don't have to rebuild it from scratch, but it needs some work.
Yeah, needs a little love.
Yeah.
That's all right.
So as far as the volunteering goes with us, so Amy, it's one of her passions, and I never really thought about volunteering, but she's done it so much, and then obviously, you get roped into a lot of stuff that your spouse likes, and you have voluntold. But then I really became to enjoy it, and what works for us is I'm not too big on the organization and the scheduling of the volunteering. She just goes with stuff and runs with it, and I'm always just her +1 extra committee member. Mm-hmm. So with Irish Fest, I'm not an official Irish Fest volunteer. I'm not on any of Irish Fest roles. I don't go to any meetings. I am it's kind of understood that I am Amy's extra person. I'm her permanent volunteer committee member. Yeah, exactly. What are we doing today, boss?
Yep.
The great thing about volunteering is I've only been doing it now for about 10 years, and I got into it because Matt's dad, Doug, did My Waterloo Days, and around the time I had David, he was the director of My Waterloo Days. And I was watching him just get ready for it, prepare for it. And we had seen him every year, just the chaos of the weekend, and I enjoyed it. And so I've always loved having something to do, and I've always loved having a purpose. And so what better than find a good group of people to work with and just make that happen?
That's one of the important things of just a good mental health is finding those things. We can't work all the time.
Right.
I know a lot of firefighters have side jobs or they start their own businesses. To me, that would have been more stress, where I never wanted that. But I'm more than happy to go and help at the church or do whatever I need to help out.
It's time that you get to spend together too.
Right.
So it's a shared interest, and like I said, I never really thought about volunteering, but I've come to really enjoy it. And I just really the part I enjoy is just doing stuff with her and just kind of tagging along and doing whatever needs to be done.
Yeah, time together is a big thing where it's not just sitting on the couch watching a TV show or on your phones.
Right.
But how many times I'm talking to my wife Angie now, how many times did we have a date where it was just, let's go get groceries? You know, just that time it's out.
Mm-hmm.
You have to wear pants. You have to be presentable in the public. But
Right.
the kids aren't there. And
Date night at Target.
yeah, whatever it takes to be happy and to get to do those things are important parts of that good mental health.
I agree.
So, Amy, Matt has probably used the term before of a senior blue shirt. I've kind of coined my own, which is a senior blue skirt, which is the fire wives that have been there for a while.
Yes.
That know the routine, that understand that Christmases are missed, that understands that some days just aren't real great talking days.
Yes.
What advice can you give to the new spouses of firefighters that would help them 10, 12, 15 years from now?
Hang in there and have good communication. That's the number one thing, because your spouse is going to be thrown into so many different things, and the things at home can always be handled. You know, it's all reactionary based. And when you're young, you tend to react a lot easier. As I've gotten older, I've had the perspective of looking back and saying to myself, you know, some things were just small things, and not necessarily everything needs to go through dad, especially when dad's so stressed out at work all the time. Mm-hmm. So you just kind of learn to roll with things easier. There's not any all-encompassing advice that I can give out other than you just take every experience as it is and you just roll with it, because things do get easier. Raising kids not necessarily doesn't get easier, but you just kind of go through levels. Like you get rid of diapers and you trade that out for something else.
Right, those little graduations.
Right.
We're out of diapers, or we don't have formula to worry about anymore, or eventually they get to the point of they don't even live in this house anymore.
Right, like right now I'm doing 4th grade and 9th grade math.
Yeah, awesome. It's good to keep up on your skills.
It's a good
like that.
refresher.
Yeah. I'm
So-
sure you'll notice as well that in our 18 years in the fire department, I've lived in the same house for 17 years. We've had exactly one bat in our house, and I bet you can guess what day it was.
It was a shift day.
It's obviously a shift day. It's always those things that seem to happen when you're on shift.
Yes.
So to know that we have good partners at home, that yeah, there might be some screaming and there might be some, it's somehow trapped in the windowsill.
Right.
I know it's going to be taken care of.
Your in-laws' hypoallergenic dog gets attacked by bees outside, and you're allergic to bees, or
Right.
every
Yeah.
bad thing's going to happen on
Things that
shift
you
day.
would never imagined to happen would
Right.
certainly happen on a shift day.
I agree, and it still does.
And it still will. I always use the joke too of I could always tell when I was on 31 when my partner's wife would show up because we would get called out.
Yeah.
The curse of a 31 wife. If she shows up, we are always going to get called out.
That's true.
Now you haven't been there long. You being there longer than Matt, what kind of advice would Angie give to a fire wife? Because she would give me advice.
Like you said, definitely you have to roll with it, and everything gets scheduled on a shift day. Every concert, every big playoff game, the bat happens on a shift day, trips to emergency room, shift days, so just you can do it.
Yes.
And there's the firefighter family, I guess, definitely to support you, and they can take time off too if need be, if the emergency calls for it.
That's a great point. When we moved into the house we're in now, we lived across the street from Kyle Fuller and Sarah Fuller for a couple of years before they moved up to Cedar Falls. And I thought I was going to have it made in the shade living across the street from a firefighter. Because, on shift days in the winter, this guy can just come over and start the snowblower for me, help me out. But then they moved, and
Yeah. Did you get some young couple in there afterwards, though?
we did. But they're just not, we haven't talked to them too much as we were involved with the Fullers.
Sure.
They moved in, they had a new baby right at the beginning of COVID. So we didn't talk to them beyond waving from across the street for a year.
Right.
And we talk to them now occasionally, but it's first year it was just waving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you have a newborn, you don't want other
Oh yeah,
people
I think
around
she
that
was
kids
super
around.
pregnant when they moved in, and I think they'd been there 2 weeks, and we saw the signs posted out front, with the balloons that
Yep.
they'd had the baby. So
Awesome.
The Waterloo Fire family has been pivotal in getting this far too. Lean on the other wives, lean on the other spouses, because we're all in the same boat. Just listening to the other podcasts and just gaining more perspective on, wow, that happened. That happens to us too.
one of the prime examples of how this career and this job is a little bit different than a lot of others is I would not have been able to go to paramedic school if it weren't for the support of my coworkers. I can't think of many other places where, like, hey, I want to better myself in my career. Can you guys take some of your time and help me out? And from my battalion chief at the time, Mike Moore, who's now retired, but, extremely respected by everybody that we work with, all the way down to everybody on different shifts coming in and helping me cover while I was in class, because most of my class was during the day. I wouldn't have been able to do it without the help of the department, and they were outstanding at it.
I think too, another point is to all the spouses and families out there, go to the picnics, visit the stations, get to know, it helps to know who your spouse is working with,
Right.
so that you can understand those stories a little bit that they're telling you, get to know the other spouses and their kids, so that you have that support from them as well.
Right.
And you can go out, you can go to the union picnic or whatever, even when they're on shift, and still have that support.
That's absolutely right. I have a great relationship with Jamie Enan, who, Travis was Matt's partner for years. And we have a very special relationship just on the side of them being partners, because we really truly understand what they were going through.
Right, you had those similar experiences, and you can relate to each other so much better.
Yeah.
One piece of advice that I want to give, when you asked Amy about advice for fire wives, and then Angie spoke on it also, is when I was talking earlier about helping new guys and talking to them about it, is one of the things I've been starting to stress to new guys when I give them advice is advice for them and their spouses. And the biggest piece of advice, and the one I like to share, is you got to put yourself in each other's shoes.
Absolutely.
She has to have understanding that you're going to come home useless sometimes, and you're going to do your best, but you're going to come home useless. There's times when you need that understanding from your spouse. And on the flip side of that coin, you can't, being the firefighter, you can't do that too often. You have to have the understanding of all the stuff. Her life didn't stop just because you were gone for 24 hours. She's got a lot going on. And when you show up, her day's already been going for an hour and a half, and she's got a lot going on today. You need to be helpful. You guys need to be in each other's shoes and look at each other's perspectives and communicate and talk about what you need from each other is probably the biggest piece of advice I can give.
That is key, what we need from each other, and we've said that a lot. And it's hard to have an open dialogue about that too. Easier as you get older, not so much when we were in our 20s.
Well, you're still a little self-conscious that you need to be Superman or Superwoman, and I can handle it all.
Right.
And that's not reasonable to believe.
We're all human, and I feel like employers see that more now too after COVID, is that people are human. They have families. They have separate lives. They kept these separate lives going even when they were working for them at home.
Anything else you guys want to share, talk about?
I don't think so.
Covered a lot today.
Thanks so much for having
Yeah,
us.
Appreciate it. Matt and Amy Carter, thank you very much.
Yes,
thank you.
thanks.
Throughout this entire interview with Matt and Amy, I kept thinking of the old saying, man plans and God laughs. When you listen to what their plans were when they were younger, it never turned out anywhere close to that. But they're happy now, they're in a good place now, so their plan worked overall. It just wasn't the one that anyone thought about. I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, is very few people decide they want to be a firefighter at an early age. There are absolutely some that do, but once we get into this family of firefighting, we can absolutely see that there is a bigger, better plan, and we're going to become part of it. One of the other important aspects I'd like to talk about after their interview is the idea of having that partner that can see you hide stress. We are the worst, and by we I mean firefighters, at lying to ourselves first and then others later on how healthy we are, physically or mentally. we have to buck up, for lack of a better term, and listen to what our loved ones see as well, because they're seeing us from a different view that we can't. I'd also like to discuss the concept of our schedule. And now I know we've talked about it several times. We talked about it here today on the 24 on and 48 off schedule. To talk to someone that doesn't have this schedule, it's, oh my gosh, that sounds horrible. Where in reality, for us as firefighters, it's phenomenal. You talk to most people, they wouldn't want to go to a 40-hour week after they've scheduled a 24-48 for a while. It puts an extreme stress on their spouse, on their significant other, because they're a single parent for that 24 hours. We can call, we can talk, they can visit the station, but we're not there at bedtime for little ones. We're not there for the 3 a.m. kid comes to the bed because he's going to throw up conversation. It's hard. It's hard for our spouse, and we do understand that. I hope that as a firefighter, you see those things and you can appreciate the job your spouse is doing. We've talked about it several times now. I remember back in our second episode with Elliot and Marty mentioning those things. It always goes bad on the 24-hour shift. So once again, it's an unsung hero of the firefighter's spouse and significant other. One last thing I'd like to talk about is, remember, it's never too late to talk about your mental health problems, your mental health journey, or your mental health concerns with someone, whether it be a medical professional, whether it be your spouse, whether it be your partner on the ambulance or your partner on the fire truck. It's never too late. Something that happened a year ago, you may think, well, it's over, it's done. Talk to somebody if it keeps coming up. We can't reiterate that enough, that we need to stay healthy physically and mentally to do this job the best we can. That's our show this week. I'd like to thank Matt and Amy Carter once again for stopping in. I'd like to thank my producer, Angie Beck, for understanding what all these buttons do and how to push them. I'd like to thank Caleb Martin for the original music. I'm Bill Beck. This is the podcast. And until then, make your voice heard.